After a week, I realised that actually in my everyday interactions, there wasn't any English people. I went to the tube station, the guy was West Indian. I went to the shop, you know, the people who served me definitely weren't British. And then I realised actually anyone that I interacted with in my everyday life, you know, at the sort of bottom of the pile, nobody was British.
Sonia Bell tells of how both her and her mum experienced new beginnings when they individually moved from Ireland to the UK. This is Writer's Mosaic, What We Leave We Carry, the series that tells the true life stories of migration to the UK.
I'm from Dublin in Ireland. Our family weren't a conventional Irish family. My mother's family, her mother was Jewish and her father, he was Catholic, but he didn't have faith. He didn't like the Catholic Church at all. You know, he was a communist and he fought against fascism in the Spanish Civil War. And on my father's side, they were Protestant, so we weren't a conventional Irish family at all. My mother really didn't want us to go anywhere near a Catholic school. We lived in Sandymount when my father was around. We went to, you know, local Protestant school, and then when he left, we moved to inner city Dublin, a place called the Tenters in the Liberties of Dublin, because of our sort of Jewish ancestry. There was a little Jewish school called Zion National School. It was like a corporation school on Bloomfield Avenue, and so we went there. My great-grandparents, they came originally from Ukraine, when it was Russia at the time. And I think they were getting the boat to New York and they ended up in Southampton or Manchester, I can't remember. Anyway, they came over to Dublin. Well, originally they had wanted to go to New York, I suppose, or somewhere in America. It was ironic, actually. Ireland was under British rule, and so Jewish people were accepted into Britain and Ireland. And then when Ireland gained independence, they wouldn't accept any more Jewish people. Basically, De Valera didn't want them in the country, you know. My father left us. He rented a house and he hadn't been paying the rent, and he just kind of did a runner one night, and so my mother was left. She had just got a job and the landlord wouldn't let her pay the rent, so we had to leave, so basically all our stuff was flung out. He didn't want a single mother with children. He thought it would sort of bring down the tone of the area, you know. My mother, when she met my father, she had just done 1 year of a diploma in graphic design. Now she, you know, her family were very creative and they encouraged creativity. You know, they loved books, they loved politics, you know, they were, you know. So she met my dad, got pregnant, and so she had to leave her course, obviously. He was a chronic alcoholic. So she had myself, my brother and my sister. She, with my aunt, they started making clothes to sell at the Dandelion Market in Dublin. It was like this really kind of countercultural place. And there was like musicians, you know, people selling stuff that they made, lots of bric-a-brac, you know, it was just all the characters in Dublin, you know, street performers. And I actually remember, you know, as a 7-year-old going and helping her, but she did that to make money so that she could go back to college. And she did. So she sort of became very independent of my father. My mum was very lucky because she came from a big family, and she had a lot of support from her sisters and her brothers. Because she had grown up, you know, in a very sort of other environment. They weren't really part of Irish society. They were part of, like, you know, the alternative, you know, like the theatre and the Communist Party and all of that kind of stuff. They were involved with all of that lot, but, you know, in terms of conventional Irish society, you know, she'd never been part of it. And so she was quite, she kind of cocked a snook to it, really, I think. You know, I remember, like, when we lived in Sandymount, before my father left, there was a sort of group of these women, 3 women, with their children living together in a house. And actually I was best friends at the time with one of the children of that house. I went around for, like, you know, for play date, and my mother came to pick me up. And it turns out that it was this woman, Anne Fishman, who my mother knew from when she was little. So anyway, Anne, she drove to India with 2 other people in a car. They were so naive, you know, because they were driving through, like, quite dodgy areas. The original hippie trail. Where we lived was like just this very ordinary working class area, and then Anne and her friends kind of rock up, all dressed head to toe in their kind of orange flowing robes. She had become a disciple of this Indian guru called Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. So there was a sort of few people in Dublin were sort of really getting into it, and it was a sort of really nice little kind of community, you know, people go around to each other's houses, you know, they were kind of really into all the whole food, that, you know, there's just that kind of very small alternative Dublin community. After my father left and we moved to the Tenters, a year later my mother got really seriously ill, and they gave her a year to live. She had Hodgkin's disease, and, you know, she was like, she was going to die. She was in hospital for like months, you know. We had our aunt looking after us, but, you know, they could only do so much, and as she was getting better, she couldn't really cope. And so we were quite neglected. We were kind of dirty behind the ears, we were a bit scruffy. And we were picked on. I was very quiet at the time, and I sort of developed a persona. It was like a sort of protective. I became more outgoing. You know, it was hard for all of us. I think when you're in something like that, you don't really see it. It is what it is. That's just what you know. And so I think, you know, she got better, and then Anne had come back from India, and this whole, you know, beautiful looking scene, you know, with this kind of ideas of communes, all the children kind of been looked after, you know, the idea of it takes a village to raise a child. She was kind of done with the kind of lone parenting, you know, in this kind of conventional neighbourhood. So she took sannyas, and she'd built this shed at the side of the house out of sugar boxes. She was just very, very creative, and she loved building things. And she painted a sunrise on the shed, and it became a local landmark. And of course I was mortified. I was just like, Jesus Christ, I don't live here. What are you doing? You know, and because I was a little girlier at the time, you know, because I kind of had to fit in very quickly, you know, and I was just like, this is just not my look, you know. There was a commune in Cove in Cork, and I was 15 at the time. I had just left school, and I said, I'm not going. I had become very problematic. I was a real troubled teenager. I was like, I was on steroids, you know. I just thought the whole sannyas thing, you know, because she was so anti-church, and I just saw it as like really hypocritical. All went round dressed in orange with this sort of little photograph of Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. Just thought it was really hypocritical, because there they are, you know, it's like the mala, that's what they were called. I saw it as like another set of rosary beads. So I really turned against my mother. I gave her a really hard time. I wasn't going to the commune. She went out, my younger sister and brother, and I stayed in Dublin. So I stayed in the house, came and went as I pleased. But I kind of got bored with the school, and I kind of just used to bunk off. I got a job selling jewellery in Grafton Street, And I sort of made friends there with kind of all the punks and stuff. I decided I wanted to be in a band, bought a bass guitar from somebody up the road on Thomas's Road, and got a band together, and we were called Broken Hymens. And then my mother left the commune and I went down to Cork. And then I kind of got in with the scene in Cork. And everyone was going to London, and I thought, oh, this is a great idea. So basically everyone was saving up to go to London, is kind of what you did. I mean, mostly because there was no real kind of culture. All the music and the art and everything was over in London, basically. And we sort of felt like we were aliens. You know, we just wanted something more. I mean, Ireland was in just like this terrible recession. And I mean, if you didn't have your leaving cert, you just couldn't get a job. I left school at 15, so I had no prospects. And I knew, and I'd heard of people that had gone to London and actually managed to get like a job in sock shop, which seemed like, you know, really kind of glamorous at the time. Ireland was just like this really repressed, you know, from the Catholic Church. I mean, people, women especially, there was shame around anything to do with the female body, anything to do with periods, anything to do with sex. It was just, the church had such a hold over everybody. I was nowhere near a Catholic church. It just seeps into your bones, you know. You know, it doesn't matter. It's there, you know. It's just this kind of fog of repression, really, you know. I used to just spike my hair and, you know, really quite anti-feminine, you know, looking, dress all in black, have like wear heavy boots. I remember I made a belt and I stuck nails in it, you know. It was all very sort of spiky and just like, yeah, fuck off everybody. And then I shaved my hair off. Fuck the patriarchy, basically. When I moved down to Cork, because nobody knew me, I kind of ramped it up and I did more and more outrageous things. Because, I mean, yeah, cars would stop and, you know, people would, yeah, it was just, I just thought it was really funny. I even, like, we had a little dog and I even, like, dyed its little mane with beetroot, you know, that's back to the hippie. So it had a little pink little mane. And I remember going into town with the dog, you know, yeah, this is my little punky dog. So I got the bus from Cork, and it was a really long journey and came into Victoria. I went on my own. I was 17 and my boyfriend was in London at the time. He was living in a hotel. It was full of like weirdos and it was like really grotty. It was in West Kensington, a place on Gunterstone Road. I think it was called Gunterstone Hotel actually. I remember going to into Victoria Station and it was the morning, it was the rush hour. And it was this mad, you know, big concourse, is that what they call it? Yeah. And there was just like this stream of people, this narrow stream of people moving from one end to the other and in a line almost, you know. And the rest of the station was kind of empty apart from this stream of people. And I remember really being taken back by that. I'd never seen anything like it before. It was just this endless people just coming up from the tube or going from the train into the tube, you know, all going in the one direction. And I remember standing, just looking at it, just thinking, oh my God, I've never seen anything like that in my life, so many people. We knew a few people in the hotel from Cork, people from Dublin, there was people from all over the UK. Mostly young, but there were some older people there. So you could just go and sign on until you got a job. We would go see gigs, just explore, kind of roam around. London was just this massive expanse of people and, you know, houses as far as the eye could see, you know, and just so many different people, you know. It was just, I really liked it. I loved it, actually. It was just though, I sort of felt like I belonged because nobody belonged. When I first went over, I was really paranoid about speaking with my Irish accent, you know, because of all the IRA stuff, you know, there's lots of bombing and, you know, it was kind of in the middle of the Troubles. After a week, I realised that actually in my everyday interactions, there wasn't any English or London people, British people. I went to the tube station, the guy was West Indian. I went to the shop, you know, the people who served me, you know, definitely weren't British. And then I realised actually nobody here is really, you know, anyone that I interacted with in my everyday life, you know, at the sort of bottom of the pile, nobody was British. In London, you know, I was going, oh my God, you know, Sonia Bell, I think my mum would love it here. So she had sold her house in Dublin and she had moved into the commune in Cork. She then went to Oregon, huge, massive Oregon commune, where she took my brother and sister there when they were children. And anyway, so she came back to Dublin. Her friend Anne said, you know, why don't you come to London? You can get somewhere to live and, you know, have a nice life here, you know, get a job even, you know, teaching your graphic design or whatever. She ended up in a tower block just at the top of Tottenham Court Road. She loved it there. She loved Regent's Park, walking around. She wrote loads of poetry about Regent's Park and just loved the area, loved going for like a tally on Drummond Street, you know. And then she got housed in Islington with my brother and sister. They got a 3-bedroom council flat and I sort of stayed with her for a few weeks and we still weren't getting on very well. I went and I found out somebody who was squatting in a flat in Chalk Farm on Ferdinand Street. There was a big housing estate there and actually I bought the keys off of them because they wanted to go to Denmark. So I got a loan from the bank for like 200 quid so she could go to Denmark, and then so I moved into the squat and I stayed there for quite a few years actually. I just loved the fact that nobody was judging you because we were terribly judged. You know, my mum was terribly judged. We were terribly judged just because we weren't a conforming family. And I just loved the fact that you could get a job here. One of the first jobs I had was at the London Graphic Centre. Made lots of friends there. But I remember I got a job answering the telephone and people would mock me for my accent. They would sort of say 33 and a third, you know. And so I dropped my accent, I changed my accent. So the 33 and a third became 33 and a third. I was sick of people I didn't like that. At the time, there was a massive Osho Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh community in London. There was the Humaniversity. There were like loads of restaurants run by sannyasins. There was a real sort of buzz around the whole sannyasin community because you could make your own stuff happen, you know. So you could start your own little company and you'd have all your sannyasin pals working with you. And I kind of felt there was kind of a lot of predatory behaviour with a lot of the men, you know, because they had this kind of idea of kind of free sex basically, and I had a lot of kind of older men hitting on me. It's a couple of sannyasin guys, and I was just like, no, you know, and it was horrible actually. Like, I mean, Bhagwan had this thing: you couldn't be a spiritual person if you had children, and so a lot of women actually got sterilised. There was a lot of misogyny. So something like that, you know, at its beginnings, you know, it's kind of all utopian and, you know, people mean well, you know, and the people that I knew at the beginning were great. They were great people and they had really idealistic and were looking for a better life. But then, you know, it attracted really unsavoury characters, actually. My mother came from a really big family. They always had sort of brilliant family gatherings and stuff. And I suppose I missed that. It was just a shame that my kids couldn't have that kind of contact with their wider family, because once I had the kids, we didn't go back so much, you know. I married a fella I've known since school. We're still very happily married and stuff. And we would go back to Dublin, but we would see his family because I was estranged from my father. And my mother lived here, and so I would go and stay with his family, and then I would kind of go and see aunts and uncles, but we didn't go back very often. I mean, I'd tell them stories, you know, like Children of Lear and all of that. But my eldest son, he's 25 now, and he really identifies as Irish because he hates what Britain has become today. He hates that. All my kids, they very much see themselves as Irish. Food, I used to make Irish bread, you know, soda bread. I used to make a coddle when they weren't vegetarian, that kind of thing. And I would cook them Jewish food as well, actually, like chicken soup. And a Jewish grandma used to make this. She'd get a tin of salmon and she would get breadcrumbs and an egg, and she'd kind of make it into little patties, you know, and fry them up. And they were lovely cold with a picnic. So it was kind of like I was sort of passing on the little bit of Jewish culture I had and a bit of the Irish culture. One of the first times I came back, and I was talking to some fella I was in Stansted, and he was Irish, and he asked me what part of England I was from, which was a bit, you know, which I was a bit taken aback. Ireland's a really beautiful place. I've got like relatives over in the west, beautiful countryside. Dublin, it's really weird. So a lot of the places where I grew up around the Liberties, they've been knocked down, you know. A lot of the places I would roam as a young teenager, they're gone. Dublin is like this sort of place in my imagination almost. It exists in my head. The UK has gone backwards, you know. We came over here because it was progressive, forward-looking, and now, you know, with Brexit especially, you know, so many people I know have moved back. Ireland is, I mean, on paper anyway, you know, with equal marriage, abortion, I mean, wow. I mean, I remember my mother campaigning in the 70s for women's rights over their own bodies, you know. She had this poster in the door. There was the pregnant archbishop, a pregnant pope, and a pregnant, I think it might have been Charles Haughey at the time, the Taoiseach. So you'd open the front door and you'd see this poster. It said if they could get pregnant, the laws would be really different. She was such a sort of expansive and creative person. And so she was able to really flourish here. I mean, throughout her life, she'd had the shadow of the Hodgkin's disease, you know, that nearly killed her. She dropped the sannyas, she dropped Osho, Bhagwan Shirasneet, and she took up with the Sufis. So that was a sort of much quieter, gentler thing. And she would go and meditate once or twice a week with a little group of people in this woman, Mrs. Tweedy's house. She had her allotment. She loved that. And she wrote her poetry and she did her art. She just loved it here. She was able to become herself, you know, her true self. She felt at home here. One day, you know, instead of going on holiday, I did this course at the Islington Arts Factory, and it was run by this he's quite well known now, West Indian artist called Denzil Forrester and his wife Pippa Claydon. And it was a 2-week course, and that course changed my life. It was an art course, and we did drawing, we made things, and I just thought, oh gosh, you know, this is what I want to do. I want to be an artist. I want to go to art school. I finished the course, made some great bits of work I was really proud of. I left my job answering the telephone. I got a cleaning job. I did lots of part-time courses to build a portfolio. I got into Glasgow School of Art. I don't think I would have been able to do that in Ireland. You know, here you kind of had a second chance and a third chance. It's not really like that now, but it was. There was a lot of opportunity.